What happens when politics starts driving supply chain decisions just as much as cost, quality, and speed? For decades, companies built global supply chains around one idea: source wherever cost is lowest and scale is highest. That model worked, but it's changing fast. Trade policy, regional conflict, sanctions, tariffs, and economic nationalism are reshaping where companies buy, build, and move products. Geopolitics is no longer background noise. It's now a core supply chain variable. In this video, I'll break down what's changing, why companies are rethinking sourcing, and what leaders need to understand right now. For years, the logic was simple. Companies chased low-cost sourcing, concentrated production where labor and scale were strongest, and relied on global transport networks. This worked in a relatively stable world where efficiency was the priority. But it had a weakness. It was efficient, not resilient. When geopolitical conditions shift, supply chains built around a few countries or routes become exposed. A system optimized for cost can quickly break when tariffs rise, borders tighten, or conflict disrupts trade. That's the shift we're seeing today. Companies moving from pure efficiency toward balancing efficiency, resilience, and control. One of the biggest drivers of this shift is trade policy. Tariffs, export controls, and industrial policy are changing the economics of sourcing. A supplier that looked cheapest a few years ago may no longer be the best option once political risk is factored in. Companies now have to think ahead. What happens if trade relations worsen? What if restrictions hit a key product? What if a country becomes strategically sensitive? This is why firms are reassessing dependence on certain countries for semiconductors, batteries, and electronics. Trade policy is no longer just a government issue. It directly shapes supplier choices, network design, and investment decisions. Regional conflict is another major risk. When conflict hits production regions or key shipping routes, disruption happens fast. Transportation becomes less reliable, costs rise, and delays or shortages follow. Companies may reroute freight, redesign networks, or carry more inventory. But uncertainty itself is just as disruptive. When uncertainty rises, businesses pause investment, rethink sourcing, and shift production footprints. That's why supply chain leaders now treat geopolitics as an operational risk, not just a headline. At the same time, economic nationalism is reshaping how supply chains are built. Many countries want more control over critical industries, and governments are pushing for domestic production while reducing foreign dependence. This has accelerated nearshoring, friendshoring, and regionalization. Globalization isn't ending, but it is becoming more fragmented and political. Companies are no longer just asking where the cheapest source is. They're asking where supply is reliable, stable, and flexible. In response, companies are redesigning supply chains around resilience. They're reducing dependence on single suppliers, adding backup options, and moving production closer to customers. They're improving visibility and building scenario planning into decisions. Some are even holding more inventory for critical components. None of this is free. Resilience increases cost. But the real question has changed. It's no longer about the absolute lowest cost design. It's about protecting continuity, revenue, and long-term competitiveness in an uncertain world. Today, it's not just about logistics or operations. Leaders need to understand geopolitics and how it impacts sourcing and networks. They need analytical skills to evaluate risk and trade-offs, and strategic thinking to align supply chains with business goals. They must work across functions and communicate risk in clear business terms. Here's the bottom line. Geopolitics is reshaping supply chains because the world is no longer driven by cost alone. It's driven by security, national interest, and resilience. Supply chains are becoming more regional, more diversified, and more risk-aware. Companies that recognize this shift early will be better positioned to compete and respond to disruption. If you work or study supply chain management, this is one of the most important shifts to watch. The future won't be shaped only by logistics. It will also be shaped by policy, power, and global realignment. If you found this useful, subscribe. And let me know if supply chains are becoming more resilient or just more expensive.